have anything to say would say, now here he come. Yeah, yeah. Don't nobody want none of your dirty, never clean out container eyes. God lie. I can remember when I used to love Mr. Softy. I used to beg my mother, Mommy, please, can you have some Mr. Softy? Please.
Facts.
And she would curve me. But sometimes she would let me rock, and she would get some Mr. Softy too. But I'm glad he stopped disrupting what I'm doing, so let's get back to it. So, you know what? No, that's actually a great segue. So, Mr. Softy. Mr. Softy right now is using his voice. And you say, Passion, what do you mean by that? Well, Mr. Softy is playing his theme music, right? And so he's using his voice to communicate his message, right? And so we've been talking about communication. We're always talking about communication and the necessity of effectively communicating. And so Frank and I were actually having a conversation because sometimes when he talks, right, he's already soft-spoken. Then he does this trail off thing. So then it's like a mumble thing. So he'll be talking and so it's like we're having a conversation and then he's like, I have like a couple of other friends that do things like that. Like they'll be talking and then it'll be right here and we're good and I can hear it and I'm with it, and then they'll do this trail off thing. And it's hard enough when we're face to face. But then they want to do things like that when we're on the phone. Let me tell you something about technology, all right? When you're on a cell phone, sometimes the communication isn't that clear, okay? And then, like, y'all that love these earbuds and everything else, y'all be swearing that you sound so clear because you can hear clearly. You don't. Oh, you sound kind of terrible a lot of the times, right? So then, when y'all do this mumble thing, I can't hear you. And whether or not that's an issue with my hearing or it's an issue with your speech, it's an issue nonetheless. So if you would kindly stop telling secrets to yourself in the midst of our conversations, I would greatly appreciate it. But I said all that to say that one time I was in a class and we were talking. There was one participant in the class. We were on it was a late night Zoom. Shout out to Post-Trump Secret Society. We were on a late night Zoom and one of the members was talking about his life and his experience and what it was that he wanted to do and what he will be doing going forward in terms of motivational speaking. And so I dropped in and did kind of like a very impromptu, very unintentional, like 30-minute masterclass on the power of the voice. And so that's what I really wanted to talk to you all today. Talk to you all about today. The power of your voice. So a lot of us, we've had experiences where we've felt like we aren't heard or we're not being listened to because maybe our tone is lower or because we're speaking in a more, I don't want to say demure, I want to say reserved way. And so we feel like our next recourse when we're not being heard is to get louder. And a lot of that is because that's our conditioning, right? When we were children, we were spoken to the first time, we didn't listen. We were spoken to a little bit more sternly. The next time, we didn't listen. By the time they had to repeat themselves again, it was not just an elevated pitch, it was just full on yelling. And so we adopt what we see, one, is effective for us, and two, even if we didn't like it, what we know that we responded to, and we expect for other people to respond to it as well. But I want you to just be mindful of the power of your own voice. And that's multifaceted, right? So you don't always have to yell to get your point across. And you don't have to lose your temper to get your point across. Even when you feel like you have to, even when you feel like that's the only way you're going to get a response, you don't always have to flip or go off the deep end or go to that place, because there's such a negative impact that it has on you. But you have to understand the control that you have just by using your voice, right? So as a spoken word artist, one of the things that I learned is how to control a room with my voice. And it wasn't intentional. It was just something that I was able to discern. First of all, certain timbres of voice have different, oh, dear lightning, go back to the sky. Okay. Please take your lightning bolts and throw them elsewhere. Thank you. Goodbye. So, what was I saying? I was saying that as a spoken word artist, I indirectly learned this just through delivering different pieces. So I would deliver one piece one way, and then in another event deliver it another way, and I saw that the differences in the impact in the delivery, right? So there's one piece that I wrote in particular, and it's intended to be one of those pieces where you've just kind of like reached your wit's end, and so it's delivered rapid fire. This is not a conversation. So it's one of those diatribes, if you will, where I've reached my wit's end. I have all these things that I want to say, and now I'm not interested in giving you any wiggle room to jump in the conversation. I'm just going to say what I need to say, and I'm getting it off my chest, and if you have any input, you're going to say it at the end of this, because I have all these things to say, and I'm going to get it all out in one breath. That type of piece. Now I've delivered that same piece and delivered it like this. And when I delivered it like this, it still was very, very impactful. And for somebody who's not able to hear the message as quickly or able to process all of the information that's being spewed at them very quickly, they were able to receive that piece very differently. So those were some of the tools that I was teaching him. It's one of the tools that I want you to go forward with when we separate from this pod. I want you to think about how you're delivering things, how things have been delivered to you and how they impacted you, and what you've taken from that. Are you a yeller? Right? I had that conversation with a coworker recently. She said that, she's a yeller, that her father was very physically and verbally abusive. So she's a yeller. She doesn't do the physical, but she's a yeller. And so the conversation that we were having was about, the fact that her son, he doesn't respond well to it. And I'm like, it's more than just your son not responding well to it. It's actually how you're responding to it as well, because your body is responding to that. Your cells are responding to that. There's a metaphysical impact, whether or not you understand. And that's something that I bring up often, but I don't think that everybody has a full understanding of it. So at one point I will have a guest on here so that we can really dive a little bit deeper into that, because I want people to really understand what metaphysics is and understand why it's important with respect to our everyday. We take for granted that what we do is just something that we do. That there's no such thing. Abolish that thought. Don't even allow it to have room in your mind. Don't let those words come out of your mouth anymore. And when your kids say things, it's just a song, or it's just an expression. I was thinking about that the other day. There's no such thing. Words have power. Words have power. Words have power. So choose how you want to use your power wisely. So, getting back to my coworker, she's a yeller, and we were talking about her son and how he responds to the yelling. He doesn't really respond well to it, right? None of us did. I know I didn't. I might have listened, I might have acted, but I didn't act out of respect at that point. That was more of a fear reaction, or I just don't want to be yelled at anymore reaction. It wasn't a, you know what, you're right, let me go do this reaction. And so the yelling and screaming that we do, while yes, it is effective and it does get the point across, it's so negatively impactful for everyone. The person getting yelled at, and this is a personal experience of mine too often, when I have to speak to people sharply, the response is this victimhood. You didn't have to speak to me that way. I'm an adult, I'm a this, maybe I didn't understand, you didn't have to come at me this way. Everybody knows what you didn't have to do when you hurt them or when you've offended them. But nobody remembers that you didn't have to get to that point had they listened to you the first time. I've also been in situations where I'm dealing with somebody and I spoke to them like this. And then they countered with something and I continued to speak to them like this. And they countered again. And I continued to speak like this. And they still found victimization in my calmness, because what they wanted was this reaction, right? That they weren't going to get. You had a question. I provided you A, an answer. B, the right answer. C, the right answer succinctly and accurately. There's nothing more that I need to provide you with. I don't have to engage in your foolery. As such, I will not. So they found victimization in the fact that I didn't yell and I didn't come at them crazy. The power of your voice. The person who always has to use their hands feels like their hands are their most powerful weapon, until they get to that place where they stop trying to throw hands and they only use their words. And they realize that their words are equally as impactful. A lot of us don't want to use our words because we're too lazy to find better words to use. So many people, you hear people speaking and they use these words that are amazing. We like the way they sound. Sometimes we struggle to pronounce them, but when we can pronounce them, they feel good saying them. We have no idea what they mean, but they're exciting. They are provocative. And with our $1,200 phones, we never ask the Googles, we never ask Siri, what does this mean? How do I use it correctly in a sentence? If somebody says this to me, what are they saying? Simple questions that you can ask your phone, who's always listening to you anyway and listening to all the other stupidness you say, who could get you right so that the next time you hear that word, you know exactly what's being said or what's being implied, so you know what to infer. No, we don't want to tap into that. But we get excited when other people do it. So somebody can curse you out, never use any type of profanity, vulgarity, never have to raise their voice, never have to raise their hand, and can control your responses. If you don't see that as a tool of power, your eyes are closed and they're taped shut. One of my favorite characters, who I actually was like a TV role model for me, and who I aspired to be like in parenthood, was Claire Cosby. Now that is someone whose execution of vocal control and command is unmatched. Because Claire, her face, her diction, and her delivery were everything. You didn't hear a whole bunch of yelling or screaming from her in almost every role she's ever played, but as the role of Claire Cosby, she spoke to each one of her 5 children. She had them all the way together, and it didn't take much. I aspired, and I feel like, on the maternal front, I feel like I've definitely hit that peak where I'm definitely Claire Cosby adjacent, and I'm proud. Good job, self. Thank you. I appreciate it. So in any event, because you gotta pat yourself on the back when you do a good job. You can't wait for other people to applaud you and pat you on the back, because what if they don't? This is why we do Song to Yourself Saturdays, right? We'll talk about that. But in any event, but yeah, it's the difference. It's me talking to you like this. I'm gonna get a point across. And me talking to you like this, I'm also gonna get a point across. However, I don't always have to speak like this. There are times when I can speak like this and I'll get the same point across with the same emphasis. And it's important to remember, especially like when you're in large crowds or in your, not necessarily a large crowd, but in a room or a space where people are so involved in their own conversation, they're tuning you out. You have different options. Option one is to do all the yelling and try to reel them in. Hello, hello, hello. I remember when I was co-captain of the step team, right? I was young. I was in college. And every time everybody had an opportunity to stop and like not pay attention, they're talking and loud and doing too much, but then they would get upset when I would be like, shut up. And they're like, oh, why are you talking to us like that? You can't talk to us like that. But shut up. Because you're not being quiet. And we still have to get through this practice. We still have to get through this rehearsal. Like, we all have things we have to do after this. So what are we doing? So remembering that they didn't like hearing that. They didn't like being spoken to like that. As I got older, that was something I kept in the back of my mind. Doing a lot of yelling is stressful for everybody, right? I have been in spaces where the room started to get very busy. And when I approached the microphone, I just refused to yell. So I'm going to say one word. And I'm going to project, because there's a difference between projecting and yelling. I'm going to project, but I'm still going to keep it here. Good evening. Because I know you heard me. Okay, you didn't respond, so let me repeat myself. This way you'll know that this is an interactive session. I said good evening. And everybody catches on. I didn't have to be like, yo, y'all need to pay attention to me, what y'all doing? Another thing, another memory. I was talking to a friend, and while we were talking, well, actually, we were leaving each other voice notes. Well, I was leaving him voice notes, and he was typing. And there was a lot of angry speak. And I noticed, because I'm very self-aware, and I become more self-aware every day. I noticed that as I was speaking to him and I was delivering these messages, that by the time I would finish speaking, I could actually feel the vibration, like the intense vibration in my lips. And I was like, wow, there's such an intensity in what I'm feeling. I literally feel like, remember when you were in school and you hit a pitchfork against something and you could feel the vibration in your hand as well as hear it? That's what I was feeling in my lips. And so I was thinking about the power of what words I had just used and how impactful that was. Bringing it all back to your voice, commanding the room, commanding the space. Whoever it is that you're speaking to, whoever your audience is, you don't always have to be up in the rafters. You don't always have to be so subdued where people can't hear you. Whereas that trail off is a style of speech. It is a style of speaking. If you're talking to somebody who's hard of hearing, they're not enjoying the conversation because they can't hear it. If you're talking to somebody who's not hard of hearing, but in an environment where the sound is already distorted, they are also not enjoying it. And usually that trail off part be the joke, like that be the climax of the joke, and it's like, oh wow, I don't why are you laughing? I didn't get it. But I don't want to say I didn't get it because I don't want to sound like lame. And then after too many times of asking somebody to repeat themselves, it's not fun anymore. So it's like, never mind, I was making a joke, but it wasn't funny. Like, well, maybe it was, but it would have been funny if I could have heard it. Do you understand your voice? That's a great question. Do you understand? Not do you like it, because that's a different question, but do you understand it? Do you understand all of the different parts of your voice? And I'm not asking for the professional who's been to the vocal coach. I'm asking as somebody who speaks to people. Do you understand your voice? Do you understand where in your voice certain things land? I understand my voice because I listen to feedback very carefully. So I understand that my voice is very commanding. It's why children tend to be more responsive to me when I speak firmly than maybe somebody else, than another woman with maybe a higher voice, because lower timbers automatically denote authority. It's one of the reasons why at work so many people are like, well, sir, and I'm like, yeah, no, there's no man on the phone with you, so I don't know who this sir is that you're speaking to. I'm definitely a woman, but, and they're like, oh, no, I'm sorry, miss. It doesn't matter. I don't care for your apology. State what you need to state so we can get off the phone. But like I said, I understand my voice. So I understand that the impact of my voice when I'm delivering something, depending on the vocabulary I'm using, can sometimes be off-putting. Depending on how I'm feeling is registering differently. Depending on how I'm feeling can be received differently. And for people who sometimes they need prefacing because y'all live in your own heads, right? So everybody's coming to the table with their own preconceived notions of what means. If I speak to you directly, it's because I'm giving you a direct answer. Simple. It's not because I like you or I dislike you. It's because I'm giving you a direct answer. If you ask me a direct question, the easiest way for me to communicate with you is to give you a direct answer. If I don't give you a direct answer and we beat around the bush, then we're spending too much time on a subject we might not need to spend that much time on. For why? So that what? We can have filler conversations so that we can feel like this is more friendly. Like, if we want to be friends, then let's build a relationship. But if you're just trying to get an answer to the question, if it's a yes or no question, I'm going to give you a yes or a no. And that's it. Do you understand your voice? Do you feel comfortable in using it? Have you been told or conditioned that your voice is only for certain spaces? Because a lot of us have. And so we don't feel like we can always speak freely. There were a lot of times when I didn't feel like I could speak freely. Now I'm not concerned. You're going to get what you're going to get. You ain't got to like it. Because there's a lot of things I don't like. A lot of people out here sounding dumber than doornails. And not only are they proud, but they're making a whole lot of money sounding just as stupid. And I don't like it. But I don't have to, and I also don't have to tune into it. I know that when I'm coming to the table, I'm coming to the table offering something of substance. And I know that I'm intentionally coming to the table with the objective of edifying my audience, educating my audience, and edifying my audience. If you didn't walk away with both, if you at least walked away with one or the other, then I still did my job. But we were talking about being comfortable using your voice, and have you been conditioned to use your voice in certain spaces, or can you be free to use your voice wherever? My thing wasn't so much being conditioned to use my voice in certain spaces. My voice was that a lot of the time people were uncomfortable and they tried to make me uncomfortable in turn. So I was always classified as the know-it-all, and so I was picked on, and because I'm sensitive, I didn't find it funny. I didn't think it was a joke, and so because I didn't find it funny, that entertained everybody else. So that was even more upsetting for me. And so there were times when I would shy away or I just wouldn't speak because I didn't feel like what I had to input was welcome. And truthfully, depending on the setting I was in, it wasn't. There were some peers, because it wasn't always just in school, there were some peers who didn't want to hear what I have to say because, it was like, oh, well, the compliments that would come from above were, oh, you're so intelligent, you're so well spoken, you're so this, that, and the third, and the other, or you say something and I know that it's wrong, whether it's because I've thought about this or because I've asked about this or because I've studied this, and I'm not correcting you to put you down, I'm correcting you to put you on. And instead of them receiving it like that, it's like, ah. So are you conditioned to only use your voice in certain spaces, and is that why there's a discomfort in using your voice? I was in a relationship with somebody who didn't feel comfortable speaking to people in professional capacities because he didn't feel like he was very well spoken. Now, there was nothing stopping him from becoming better spoken, but he didn't do the work. He didn't do the exercises, right? So that was a conversation that Frank and I had that somebody told him about that same trail off thing, and they told him, start using voice notes. And he's like, well, if I'm using voice notes, doesn't that defeat the purpose? And they told him, no, it's giving you an opportunity to rehearse, right? And so you can listen back to what you sound like to other people. So because he started to apply that is how he started to correct that. Now he still does it, but he doesn't do it as much. And he's more aware of it. So if somebody else pointed it out to him, then he would be able to say, I apologize, and correct it immediately. Likewise, before somebody else points it out to him, he can hear what he's saying and be like, okay, let me bring that back. Just in case you didn't hear this part right here. What I said was this, or I was just mumbling to myself. I really wasn't saying anything for both of our consumption, and that's a tool for you to use as well. I'm not going to leave you with a whole bunch of tools, but that is one tool that I would say to put in your self-correction, self-repair toolkit, is to listen to feedback and apply the suggestions on how to improve. Everything people give you is not going to be a suggestion on how to improve, but there are going to be some good ones. There were suggestions for me to stop worrying about what people were saying, stop worrying about what people were thinking, stop worrying about the feedback I was getting, stop worrying about the negatives, focus on the positives. Now, the way my mind is set up, my mind was like, yeah, good advice. But my mind was also like, but people are mean and they hurt my feelings. And my feelings are very loud. So it was like, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to just stay over here and be quiet. And then I started doing passion PSAs on the interwebs. And here we are with a whole podcast. And people going to say what they're going to say. And I'm going to still be okay. Because unless there are other podcasters with tens of thousands or millions of followers, I'm concerned. Because for what? Right. So, my beloved passionates, I'm going to wind this down with our forever closing. Go forth. Be great, be filled with bliss, be armed and empowered with knowledge. Ask yourself how familiar you are with your voice. If you are not familiar in terms of understanding what it is that your voice is to do, who it is your voice is supposed to be reaching, how it is to control your voice, how it is to take it up, project without yelling, how to scale it back, how to even bring it down to a whisper, make people come into your conversation instead of you always going out to them. If you're not sure how to do any of it, practice. Now, once upon a time, I had heard that there was a song, and the song said, I talk to myself, cause there is no one to talk to. People ask me what I do. That's before my time. But I had heard 27. That it was a song. That's right, I'm 27. But in any event, for people who are older than 27, they're familiar with that song. And for those who have talked to themselves, they've been able to hear the different ways that they've spoken. So spend some time talking to yourself. Spend some time recording yourself and listening back to how you sound. Even if you're just reading, like practice doing an audiobook voiceover. Who knows? That might be your big break for you to be able to leave the 9-to-5 rat race and become self-employed. But whatever you decide to do, as long as you become comfortable with your voice and start working on how to best and most effectively use it, I just want you to do it with passion. In all things, be passionate. And I'm going to talk to you later. I'll see you on the next one.